You're welcome. Enjoy the show. Good evening. May I help you? Do you know where you're going? I usher at a local theater as a volunteer, so I can afford to see the shows. I'm not much help. I don't wear my glasses, so I can't read the tickets. I'm the blind usher, leading people to their seats. It reminds me of something out of Greek theater. Years ago, movies had ushers with uniforms and flashlights. Churches had ushers with collection plates. Someone told me that artists are ushers who take you to a place of their making. In ancient times, the usher was an officer of justice. I'm a volunteer usher, and this is what I ask people when they come in. Do you know where you're going? Some do, and some don't. And most of them say yes or no, but a few say some of the time, or not always, or isn't it a little late in the day to be asking me that? One person looked at me and said, "Is that a challenge?" I laughed, but I knew what they meant. It's important to know where you're going, to even have a destination, and maybe a guide to help you find it. There are stories about people going to hell or Hades, and they always have a guide. That's good. I'd hate to be in hell without some kind of assistance. Ushers are leaders. Sacagawea with Lewis and Clark was something of an usher, a guide. In circumstances like that, a guide is someone you trust with your life. And sometimes at an event, a momentous occasion, a terrible disaster, or a big discovery is said to usher in a new era. I can't read the tickets, but if people can tell me their aisle, row, and seat number, I can take them there. So I'm of some use. The other night when I was ushering, I saw someone I hadn't seen for years. 10 years maybe. A long time. And now she shows up as a volunteer usher. Really a substitute volunteer usher. I asked her where she'd been and she said, "Out of town. I was coming up on 40 and I was seized by a wanderlust. So I figured I'd better get it out of my system. I decided to go as far as I could go without a passport. So I went to New Mexico, where I lived way out in the middle of nowhere. I lived in a yurt." "What's a yurt?" I said. "Don't ask," she said. "No running water, no electricity, no phone, nothing. In a yurt." It was terrible, really. I realized I had to go to get out of there. Somewhere else, anywhere else. And then I heard voices, and they were telling me to go to Alaska. "Alaska?" "That's what I said," she said. But the voices insisted, and I wasn't about to argue with them. Not then. So I went to Alaska. Fairbanks. And it was cold. Oh, yes, it was cold. Most assuredly cold. So cold, your nose freezes up when you breathe through it. Oh, colder than that. Much colder than that. So cold they would issue warnings against going outside because your lungs would freeze. Let me tell you, when you hear a lung freeze warning, you better listen up because you know it's cold. Wow, cold enough to pop a lung. But the cold wasn't the worst of it. It was the dark. It was dark all the time. It's night up there for 7 months. You just get to feeling like hibernating, and I do mean hibernating. It was just dark, 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 and cold. And you hear about the drinking and the fights and the domestic violence, and it gets worse and worse because people are cooped up together, and you're supposed to hibernate alone, I think. And maybe I'm making it sound funny, but it really wasn't. It was pretty awful. In fact, and how long were you up there? 2 years. 2 long years. 2 years that felt like 10. All that darkness. And then the sun comes back up and it's summer for about a week and then it's dark again. Dark and cold. The people up there, well, they're used to it, I guess. Up there in the territory. That's what they call it. They really don't have much use for the lower 48, the territory. And one day I just thought, what the hell am I doing here? So I got out and came back with a new name, and I got a job and a car, and here I am ushering. That's great, I said. What about your wanderlust? I think it's gone. What I'd really like to do, she said, is write. I'd like to add that to my resume. But the hard part about that, about being a writer, is you actually, are expected to write, to be writing. I haven't gotten there yet. I laughed. Maybe you will. Oh, I don't know, she said. See, my main problem is I haven't got anything to write about. I said, my God, you can't be serious. Here you are, a black woman out in a yurt in the middle of New Mexico, in the desert, hearing voices, a black woman in Fairbanks, Alaska for 2 years, in the dark, tuning in for lung freeze warnings, and you haven't got anything to write about? Well, maybe something will come to me, she said. What about this ushering? Is there anything to it? No, it's easy. You just listen for voices and take them where it says. Being new, a substitute usher, she was put in a section way up and off this side where no one was seated, and she never got the chance to lead some poor theater goer out to a yurt where they could sit and wait to experience some ghostly theater of the mind.